Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm gonna go through the 4 books that I read in January and also show you the books that I plan to read in February. I decided to put both of these into one video because I only read 4 books in January. I usually only get to read 4 to 6 books depending on the month. Some months I even only read like 2 books. So I don't think talking about 4 books will be enough for an entire video, and that's why I'm also bringing in my February TBR in the same video. So this month consisted of 1 author and 1 series. If you watched my previous video, you might already know which series I've been reading as well. But I started with The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J Maas. I got the entire box set for the Throne of Glass series for Christmas, and I started reading this on Christmas Eve. But because I had COVID, I didn't really get to read much until like the last few days in December, and ended up finishing this very early in January. I know a lot of people read this as like the 3rd book in the series. I'm happy I read it first. I feel like I got a lot more context for what was to come in like later books. I also got to like see certain names or places or whatever, and I was like, oh, we read about this in The Assassin's Blade. Instead of like being very confused, because sometimes in the 1st or 2nd book you read about something and then you're like, wait, am I supposed to know who that is, or am I supposed to know what happened? And I'm just happy that I read this first because it gave me context, and I don't think this took away from anything in the books. The only issue with reading this first is that I've kind of been like guessing whether some things are gonna come up again. Like, are we ever gonna meet a certain character again? Does this have anything to do with like the main plot line of the actual series? I feel like I'm constantly like waiting for something, and I'm not actually sure if it will come up, but I know that some of the things I've read in here have been mentioned and like done something about, I guess, in the series, so like maybe my questions will be answered. Some of them have. I ended up rating it very high, and I feel like if I read this as like the 3rd book, I probably wouldn't have rated it as high as I did, but this ended up getting 4.25 stars for me, which is pretty high. Like, it's not perfect, but it kept me engaged, and I think I liked the fact that it was split up into 5 different novellas. I felt like it was very fast-paced, and you had something to look forward to every 100 pages, because then you would be done with like a part of the book. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Then I read Throne of Glass, which is the 1st book in the series, for those of you who don't know. I got a little bit confused reading this. Like, it picks up a year after The Assassin's Blade, which is fine. Like, I was just very confused about the plot, and that might be because I read The Assassin's Blade first. I don't know how much I can say about the book without spoiling anything. Going into this, I already knew who the main character was, kind of her motivations and stuff. Like, I got a lot of information from The Assassin's Blade. Now, I don't actually know how to describe anything about this book, to be completely honest. It was very different from The Assassin's Blade, which might be why I rated this lower than The Assassin's Blade, because I gave this 4 stars. It was still a good book. Like, I loved it. It was very different from The Assassin's Blade, and that's where I think reading The Assassin's Blade is kind of a bad start, because they give off like a very different vibe. I don't know. I don't even know how to explain this, but I love the characters that were introduced. So like the main characters in the series. I also like the aspect of like a competition. That's something I always like in books. I don't know. Then I read Crown of Midnight by Sarah J Maas again, which is the 2nd book in the series. This one I liked a lot more. This one got a 4.5 stars from me. There were some parts that I didn't like as much. I'm not a reader that care that much about characters. Yeah, I don't know. I liked getting to know the characters, but I don't feel like I knew them enough or like cared about them enough to care about some of the things that happened in this book, if that makes sense. But I do love how Selena is selfish. Like, I feel like that's just a fun aspect of her character is that she is pretty selfish. Yeah, I don't know. I liked seeing that in a character, especially a main character. Yeah, I don't know what to say about this book either. Like I don't want to spoil these books. Like how do I talk about books without spoiling them? I don't more secrets, more sneaking around basically. What the fuck happened in this book? I actually don't really remember what the main plot of this book was. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't have like a very concrete plot, I think. Like, it's just a continuation of what happened in book one. I got something spoiled for me when I was reading The Assassin's Blade, and not because of the Assassin's Blade book itself, but when I was reading it. I'm the kind of person that Googles things, and I love like the fandom Wikipedia pages. So I Googled something, and before even clicking into one of the pages, I got spoiled by the results that came up. And I was so scared that I had spoiled something that would, you know, be revealed in the last book of the series. But apparently it happened in this book, which is the second book, and that was a relief. Because when I get spoiled something, I'm like, when is this getting revealed? I'm constantly thinking like, when am I gonna get this information that I have already spoiled for myself? You know? So I'm very happy that it ended up being revealed in the second book and not the last. 4.5 stars. I really, really enjoyed this one, even though I wasn't as invested in the characters in this book yet. But that's a me problem. I know a lot of people are already invested in the characters from even book one. I'm more of a plot person. Then last book I read in January is, of course, Heir of Fire by Sarah J Maas as well. This is book 3. It is thicker. It took me a while to get through this. That has nothing to do with the book itself. It was more like life around me. It also did not help that I got completely hooked on playing Pal World the past week. At this point in the series, you get a lot of different point of views. You did that in the previous books as well, but most of them were still like in the same place. In this book, a lot of people are scattered across the continent. They're not all together like they were in book 1 and 2. You also get introduced to a new character. Well, 2 new characters, I guess. But one of them is kind of like just a side character, while the other one is more of a main character as well. I also really liked the training aspect in the book. I don't know, it's something about like training montages and training plot in general I just really love. So this one got 4.75 stars. It's not 5, and that is mainly because I felt like the last 200 pages I struggled getting through, and not because of the book, that was just life, but that usually takes away from my ratings, even though it's not necessarily a book problem. It's just that it didn't keep me hooked enough to get through the last 200 pages without being distracted by a lot of things around me. That's the only reason it didn't get 5 stars. So yeah, that was the last book I read in January. So now we're gonna move into my February TBR. I've picked out 5 books. Will I read all of them? Probably not. As I said earlier, I usually read between 2 to 6 books a month. 4 books is usually what I read in a month without having to like constantly read. 6 is my limit so far. I haven't been able to read more than 6 books a month. So I thought I would pick out 5, especially because one of them is thick. And then we'll see how much I actually get to read. So the first book I'm going to read in February is, of course, Queen of Shadows by Sarah J Maas. So this would be book 4 in the series. I will probably wait until March until I read the last 3 books in the series because they are thick, and at this point I feel like I'm kinda needing a break from the series just to like read something else, but I do want to read at least this one before I take a break. I could also just start reading this and then read some other books in between. That usually works for me, especially if it's 2 different genres. Like I love the series so far. Sometimes you just need a break, because if you're not in the actual mood for the series, it will just ruin it. Then I do have like a mystery book and that is Murder in the Family by Kara Hunter. Immediately bought this when I saw it on TikTok, and I was like, I need that book. That sounds very fun. And then I just haven't picked it up, which sucks because I am intrigued by the concept. So this is a book where you try to figure out who the killer is while reading it. So you get all of the case files and stuff as the characters do in the book, I believe. So you read through them and then you try to, you know, figure out who the killer is. If you haven't seen this book before, so this is kind of like how it looks. I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm going to be a little bit quick. You get reports, you get interviews, and like other case files and stuff, and then you try to guess who the killer is. Then I want to read The Heart Principle by Helen Huang. This is the third book in a series, but it's a series of standalones. I've read the first two and this is the third one. I don't know if there's gonna be any more books in this standalone series, but yeah, I really want to get through this, and it's also on my list of 24 books to read in 2024. Usually Helen Huang's books are pretty quick for me to read. Then we have a book that I've actually started months ago, but there's always been something that's been distracting me, or a book that I wanted to read more, or just anything. And this is also the book that has my bookmark. Like, I have one bookmark, and that's been stuck in this book since I started reading it. But yeah, that book is One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. I've watched the TV show, which I believe has 2 seasons right now. I like the TV show, wanted to read this book. The only thing that's kind of throwing me off, and the reason why I haven't picked it up that much, is because the way it's written was kind of hard for me to get into. It's no problem that there's multiple points of view. That's fine. So it says the character's name, and then it says the day, the date, and the time that this happens. And I don't know why, but that's throwing me off. I think it's because I keep checking past chapters every time for when that happened. Like, I want to know where in the timeline this happens, and I just get so obsessed with checking that. That's why I haven't continued yet. But I have gotten 78 pages in. I am enjoying it. It's a little bit different from the TV show, which I expected. Like, adaptations will never be perfect. But yeah, I'm hoping that I can finish this in February, because I did start this in September, I think, and I just haven't continued. And then the last book that I do want to get through in February, and it's probably the first book I'm gonna read after Queen of Shadows, is Powerless by Lauren Roberts, which is also on my 24 books for 2024 list. So this is a book that I've been wanting to read for a while now, but because I started reading Throne of Glass, I just haven't gotten to it. This is a book where the people with powers are on the top of the pyramid, I guess. They have all the power, they have all of the good things. Those that don't have powers are banished from the kingdom. They're not really accepted into society. And then the main character of this book is a person without powers, and she is trying to survive like trials. People are saying that it gives off Hunger Games vibes, and I like Hunger Games, so I should like this. So that was all of the books. The books I read in January and the books I'm reading in February. These are very heavy. I am struggling to keep them up. Those are the books that I'm gonna read in February and the ones I read now in January. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know which books that you read in January, or the books that you plan on reading in February. Anyway, I hope you guys have a nice day and a nice week, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!